So you pulled an apple bloom?
Hey, my stuff doesn't blow up all the time.
Yeah, only maybe most of the time.
Well, mine did something a little more than just blow up. Come on now, this is the last chapter. Midnight sat down on the bed, tears trickling down her face as she came to terms with everything. She couldn't believe how wrong everything had become, how her hopes and dreams of a future free of the curse, or even how it would take her so long to try it out again. She sat moping a bit about what had happened before her mind reminded her of all the chores she needed to catch up on thanks to all those experiments. As she started to go down the list, checking on animals, filling the crates, sweeping the front of the door, she became so focused on getting all her work done that she didn't notice a small little thing lurking in the shadows. As time passed and the moon rose high into the sky, Midnight yawned as she finally flopped down on her straw bed that was quite comfy, despite all the prickly parts to it. It didn't help that some of the straw had poked at her paw and seemed to be almost like needles, and made a mental note to patch her paw up better in the morning. Her thoughts turned once again to the ritual and all her failed work that was now down the drain. She curled tight into a ball and tried to focus on sleep. As her eyes started to flutter close, a noise made her ears perk up. "A beast at this hour?" Midnight muttered. Though she had the odd nocturnal animal client now and then, most animals waited until morning to allow her some time to rest. Not to mention, Midnight had just done her rounds on every beast. Could she have possibly missed someone? As the paw steps continued, and Midnight slowly blinked at the door, expecting some beast to announce themselves. "One moment, please," she said, as she stood and stretched out her back again, closing her eyes as she felt her back crack during the stretch. For a moment, Midnight was sure she heard another set of paws move into her bedroom area, instead of waiting out front like all the other members of the forest knew. But that seemed odd even for the young nocturnal animals she would rarely get visits from. When she opened her eyes, the paw steps stopped only for a second to see who had come to seek her aid, and her eyes widened in shock. There, standing before her, in the pitch black, was a beast staring back at her with a smirk, with two very familiar golden eyes. Its tail swished playfully from side to side as Midnight could see the clear colour of purple and white all over the beast, even in this lightness of the cave. As the figure stepped closer and closer to Midnight, she could see her a bit clearer, and what she saw made her jaw drop. There, standing no less than a cart or two away from her, was another purple wolf. Now, this wolf was not exactly like her. For one thing, the shade of purple that this new wolf had was much darker than Midnight's. Second, obvious point was that this wolf seemed to have a strange star marking on its forehead. Finally, she seemed to be a bit taller than Midnight, almost the exact height of a large wolf. She sneered at Midnight with a mischievous look in her eye, like a cat who eyes a fish in a bowl. She felt herself being unnerved by the strange look the wolf was giving her before her mind started to process everything. The wolf chuckled darkly as she finally spoke.
"Are you going to quit staring at me, or do I need to knock you back into reality? Midnight wheat."
Midnight felt a stone drop in her belly when she heard the wolf utter those simple words. My name? How in Equestria does she know my name? Midnight thought, as she got into a defensive stance and growled low in her throat. "Who are you?" Midnight said, eyeing the wolf carefully. "And how do you know my name?" The wolf continued to walk towards Midnight, chuckling evilly as Midnight's fear rose bit by bit.
"What a pair of stupid little questions,"
the wolf said, receiving a loud snarl from Midnight in return.
"I would think you would have figured it out by now. Are you really that slow? Are you just choosing to have an IQ of an infant?
Midnight looked at the wolf, still confused as ever. Even though a part of her wanted to give this wolf a small lesson about calling her stupid.
I thought it was pretty obvious, but I will admit it's maybe a bit too hard for your simple mind to understand. After all,
the wolf said, as she moved her head down to smile slyly.
The miracle did have a certain change happen to it recently, didn't it?
Midnight let the words sit in her mind for a few minutes as she understood what was going on. The potion, the miracle, the accident. Though it seemed impossible, it was the only thing that seemed to even make a small bit of sense. This strange wolf was her miracle clone. As the realization hit Midnight like a sack of bricks, the clone laughed evilly at her and smiled.
So you finally figured it out. Yes, I'm you. Or rather, a better you.
She put a paw under her chin as she spoke in thought.
Of course, it would be a bit confusing with two Midnights around here. So...
the clone said as she took another sinister step forward.
Just call me Night.
Midnight slowly started to take a few steps back as she stared at this being called Night. Her heart started to race as the purple wolf began.
You know, it feels so good to be able to move around,
she said silkily.
I mean, you may have been trying to cure yourself from the curse, but you got something even better. Me.
Night said as she backed Midnight into the back of the cave.
So really, I should say thank you so much for bringing me to life, Mom.
She sat and studied Midnight before examining her claws.
Of course, you wouldn't know about having a mom now, would you? Never had one that stuck around too long, after all.
Midnight glared at Night, who shot her a taunting smile. Luna is my mom. She always will be. Midnight spat at Night.
Oh, really now?
Night said.
Well then, she must have been a lousy mother for never being able to fix you. Not to mention, she tried what? 2 times before giving up?
Night laughed as she continued on.
Oh, such dedication. Though, it was better than our birth parents, wasn't it?
Shut up! Midnight screamed. They were my parents, not yours.
I am you. So therefore, they were my parents too. Come to think of it, that means Luna is my mom too.
Night continued to laugh as Midnight seethed in anger. Midnight straightened up and tried to make herself seem taller than she was in response to Night's taunts and laughter. Leave now, Midnight said in an unusually cold voice, before I make you leave. Night stopped laughing immediately before looking wide-eyed at Midnight. The lighter purple wolf thought maybe she had finally gotten the upper paw on this darker purple wolf, but to Midnight's dismay, this was not true. The darker wolf just went back to laughing again, this time harder than before. As tears formed in the wolf's eyes, Midnight tried to seem terrifying, which just made the darker wolf laugh and cry harder.
Oh, that's rich!
Night laughed, before shooting Midnight a disturbing and sickening look.
You think you have a chance against me? That's a good one. Same old Midnight. Always a great place to find a nice joke or prank. Reminds me of all those pranks we used to play around town.
Night stopped laughing to put on a fake, innocent look of hurt as she tried to seem sympathetic to Midnight.
Oh, but that must hurt you so bad, knowing that those pranks were the reason our parents kicked us out after all.
Anger burned in Midnight to levels she had only felt once before. However, unlike the last time, this level of anger had come up. This time she was more than happy to rip this wolf to shreds. With her fur bristled and ears pinned back, she snarled at Night and charged at her foe, her paws beating hard against the ground. Everything in her was aiming solely to make this wolf's life a living nightmare. It didn't help that Night herself had stayed still this whole time, taunting Midnight to try and give her her best shot. The lighter purple wolf finally did pounce at Night, ready to rip her limb from limb. But Night suddenly jumped out of the way, and with a single claw scratched down Midnight's side, the blood dripping on her claw. Night slowly licked it off and smiled. Midnight roared in pain and anger, charging again. Over and over, Midnight attacked in anger, getting more and more frustrated, while over and over, Night dodged, scratching Midnight again and again, taunting Midnight into a blind rage. As Midnight swiped at the taller wolf, the light purple wolf was surprised to see the darker wolf completely dodged her attack, and even managed to land a swipe at Midnight's side. As a sharp pain landed on her side, Midnight grimaced as she saw a few long claw marks on her side. When Midnight looked back at Night, she was licking blood off her paw and smirking.
And here I thought Silver had taught you how to fight like a real wolf,
she taunted as she waited for the lighter purple wolf to attack her again.
Looks like you're still Luna's pet. No wonder your parents gave up on you.
Soon, new fury was awakened in Midnight, and she continued to try and attack Night. Again and again. With each attempt, not a single blow landed on Night, while soon Midnight was covered in blood and scratches. Soon exhaustion started to affect Midnight, from blood loss and fear starting to creep into Midnight yet again. As she panted to catch her breath, Midnight was taken by surprise of the malicious wolf attacking her, who slammed and pinned her to a wall. She groaned as a fresh wave of pain came at her like a tidal wave, and she stared into the dark purple wolf's eyes. As her fear began to rise yet again, Midnight noticed that the dark purple wolf grew in size, a bit, right before her eyes. Her fur was even darker than before, her fangs pointier and more jagged, her eyes began to flash solid yellow and normal again and again, and the star even had a few more points on it now. As more fear grew in Midnight, Night bellowed out a laugh before continuing.
You idiot. You still don't understand what's going on, do you? Your little experiment didn't just explode and fizzle into nothing, you know,
she said as her form towered higher and higher above Midnight.
If you had just waited a little bit longer, you would have realized you created me and released me from the part of your mind you so desperately try to keep locked away,
Night said, as she was massive now, gnarled appearance, a maw of teeth, solid yellow eyes. She was absolutely terrifying.
And with your blood that brought me to life, I managed to obtain my own form of magic. With its aid and this new body, I will be more powerful than you could ever be. And once I'm done, I'll get revenge for us both on those ponies that tormented us all those years ago. But first,
Night said, leaning her muzzle close to Midnight.
We can't have two Midnights walking around now, can we?
As Midnight let the words process in her mind, her fear spiked to levels of panic, as she saw Night grow even larger, and raise a paw to scrape at the top of the tall cave ceiling. As Midnight tried to scramble away, Night's paw pinned her down, bone-crushingly tight, making escape impossible. As Midnight screamed in fear, a roar entered the room, followed swiftly by a release from Night's grip. Frightened still by everything that was going on, Midnight looked around to see what had helped her out, and to her surprise, there was an old friend, Starling, snapping and swiping at the wolf, not able to hit it either, but enough to get it to back up. She turned to Midnight, for only a moment or two, with a look of worry before calling out, "Midnight, are you all..." was all the winged wolf could say before Night threw a pile of dirt at Starling and hit her right in the eyes. As the winged wolf tried desperately to scrape it out, Night took her chance and attacked Starling. Midnight watched helplessly as one of the few beasts that she called a sister was getting thrown around like a rag doll. After only a few moments, Night threw Starling into a wall, leaving her unconscious. As Midnight quickly tried to think of a solution, fear building inside her, she noticed a faint glow come from Night, as she grew even bigger as she was. The change made the dark purple wolf laugh and cheer, raising her paw into the air to slash down at Starling's neck. A thought crossed Midnight's mind. When she was younger, in her early years, when she was only recently turned into a wolf, she would often at times get temper tantrums and try and destroy everything around her. To get her to calm down, Luna had finally managed to calm her down by singing a little tune she had made up all those years ago. Midnight wasn't 100% sure if this would work on Night, but she had hope it would. Since Night was a clone of hers, she had Midnight's memories and knew all of her moves, so perhaps she would have her weaknesses too. Midnight moved out from where she scrambled to, took a deep breath and let her memories begin to flood her mind. As the tune and words came back to her like an old familiar feeling, she raised her head with a smile and began to sing. She started with the melody, hoping it would catch Night's attention and leave her sister alone. To her luck, it did just that. The beast stopped her assault on the winged wolf to turn back to her creator. Hearing the music, her eyes went wide as saucer as she roared and bared her fangs at Midnight. As Night snarled and slowly started to storm over to Midnight, the light purple wolf continued to sing, as soothing as she could, as she moved into the actual words of the song. Little pup, come close now, your mommy's here. Let me wrap you in my wings until the day breaks. As the lyrics started to fill the room, Midnight noticed that Night's whole being started to change. For one thing, she was starting to shrink in size, and seemed more like when Midnight had first seen her. The snarling as well lessened to almost a murr sound. Its now normal yellow eyes were drooping every so often, and overall the animal seemed calmer. Midnight smiled at herself with pride when she saw her plan was going successfully, and she knew she finally could defeat Night. Not wanting to waste her chance, Night continued on, with her smile growing. Come close now, you're looking kinda thin, a bundle of fur underneath my wing. Mommy's gonna get you a chicken, but now sleep till daybreak. As the song progressed, so did Night's changes. Everything started to shrink, decrease faster than ever, and what seemed like a blink of an eye later, where once stood a terrifying beast, was now a small, tired-looking puppy. The puppy Night was almost identical to Midnight, minus the obvious white diamond on her forehead, and now white-chested fur. To the surprise of Midnight, the puppy took a yawn and curled up and went straight to sleep. Midnight relaxed when she saw the puppy sleeping, but looked up worryingly as she heard Starling groan. When she saw her sis look at her worryingly, Midnight just gave her a small nod and smile, their old way of saying to each other that they were fine. When the winged wolf responded back with a similar fashion, they both seemed to relax. The moment of peace was forgotten, however, when a changeling came barreling down the tunnel with a heavy pant and scared look in her eyes. "What the fur happened in here?" Powder said, at a breath to shout. Night seemed to stir a bit as Midnight started to shush her. While Powder looked a little taken aback at the shush, even through all her panting, Starling also aided in her understanding by sweeping around the room and pointing to the little puppy. Midnight saw that Powder and Starling seemed to communicate with each other about what had just happened, using body language, and soon enough the changeling was trying to keep as quiet as possible. After Powder doubled back and brought in some healing items for the two, soon the healing began, and with a few healing potions, which aided them greatly with Midnight's broken bones, disinfection and some snarls from Starling and Midnight at times, the two were soon patched up, well, thanks to Powder and Bandit, who had just arrived from catching up as well. Once everyone was seated with some food and water, Starling and Powder demanded to know what had happened in their time gone. Midnight began her story. She told about all that had happened in the last 5 years, the guardianship, the reading of her books, gaining the knowledge of the mirror pool, and the incident in the mirror pool. She then told them everything with Night and how she got the pup to calm down, and how they all got to this point. Powder and Starling stared in shock through most of the story, before they looked at each other, the pup, and then back to Midnight. "Okay, you're never going to look after the cave again," the two spoke simultaneously. The three laughed happily and stopped to hush laughing when Night started to wake up. Starling, however, spoke quietly, but clearly angry as she explained she was also very disappointed in Midnight about using the knowledge she had, but was grateful she was okay. "So, what now?" Powder asked, looking at Night carefully. "Banishment or imprisonment, maybe?" Midnight, worrying for some reason for Night, shakes her head. No, I think we should keep her in the sanctuary." Starling and Powder blinked at Midnight in disbelief, as they spoke at the same time. "What?" Midnight thought and started to speak her mind. "Well, I can't keep her. I may have the experience doing these jobs, but I've got no space. Not to mention all the time it's going to take to fit my home for a cub. And getting ready for coming of fall and winter, we don't know how stable she will be here. So she needs supervised. So why not with you three?" Starling thought for a moment before responding. "It isn't impossible. We've got our room, the resources, the time, but I will need to know how you managed to calm her down." She chuckled as she looked a little embarrassed. "I'm willing to help, but I need something to help us along if that happens again." Midnight smiled and nodded. "You got it. Now, who's ready for a singing lesson?" And so, after some singing and writing down to help the lyrics to aid for later, Night became a part of the pack. When the pup had woken up, Midnight spent some time talking with her about the new arrangement and how things were going to be around here. Of course, Midnight still had to deal with a temper tantrum pup now and again, but the three guardians of Night found she was more like your average bratty pup than some big devious villain. Starling and Midnight, in response, found a surprisingly quick trick to solve the issue, which, ironically, involved Midnight's least favourite pastime, playing with the dragon cubs. Surprisingly, Night and the dragon cubs got along very well, even to the point of Night forming a pack with a few of them. After Night was settled down, however, Midnight decided to give Starling back her title of guardian and go back to her own home and life on the other side of the forest. Though Midnight would visit the pack every now and again, in time Midnight had even more adventures and even more stories, many that she would write down to share for later. But those are stories for another time. And other adventures, if you're willing to stick around and see. But those are stories for another time and other adventures, if you're willing to stick around and see.
Wow, that's one crazy story.
Yeah.
So, technically that pup is your pup?
Well, I like to think she's mine and Starling's pup. She did come from the mirror pool after all.
No offense, but this all seems a bit far-fetched. A winged wolf? Really? They don't exist.
Oh, really? I'm pretty sure I exist.
Hey, Silver. Meet the Crusaders. Sweetable, Applebloom, and Scootaloo. Girls, this is my sis, Silver Starling.
Are you the one who steals our apples from the farm?
So how was night, Midnight? Not too much trouble, I hope?
Nope, not at all. And yes, Applebloom, she is, but only because she has to. And wolves don't exactly have bits, you know?
Miss Starling, ma'am. Can we meet the other pups you have? We'd love to see them.
Now, sweetie. You should ask your sisters first. It's a bit far and deeper into the forest.
You sure you don't want to be like all the other town ponies and not want to be near a very scary beast?
Silver.
Fine. But only if your sisters say it's okay and if Midnight leads you there.
Yeah!
Yay!
What now then, girls?
Let's go get more candy and ask our sisters. See you later, Midnight. Bye, Silver. Happy Nightmare Night.
Bye, girls.
This is gonna get interesting.
Agreed. Wow, that was a long story. So, what's next? What? It's December already?